Number 10, men's time of the month. Ancient Egypt was plagued with diseases. While the Egyptians were actually pretty advanced in terms of their medical sciences and cures for said diseases, there were still a bunch that people had no defense for. In particular, schistosomiasis infected nearly everyone at the time. This is an illness that makes people feel sick and causes our red to appear often in the toilet. It was actually so common that they didn't even realize it was a disease. Ancient Egyptians got schistosomiasis so often that they just thought it was a natural part of growing up. They accepted that men had to menstruate just like women do, and they accepted the red vino on tap coming out of their bodies was a normal part of growing up. Number 9. Kinda rude. In ancient Egypt, those born with dwarfism were actually well accepted in society. Their recorded daily activities suggest assimilation into daily life, and their disorder was not shown as a physical handicap. Wisdom writings and moral teachings in ancient Egypt commanded respect for dwarves and other individuals with disabilities. But one thing I read online suggested that if you were born with dwarfism, you certainly did not have to worry about unemployment. Usually, this is because in ancient Egypt, little people were often hired to work in security-sensitive jobs, specifically those who worked with gold. This didn't actually apply only to those with dwarfism, but others with obvious physical characteristics that helped them stand out. These people were considered to be the best candidates for this kind of work because if a worker stole anything, they were very easily found and promptly arrested. Number 8, me and all my friends. Every time a First Dynasty king bit the dust back in ancient Egypt, a whole lot of people went with him. Egyptians were famously almost more obsessed with their lives after they passed on than they were with their actual lives, and a passed away king needed his retinue to support him in the afterlife. It was a shocking show of power. For example, almost 600 other people were found buried with King Jur. When a king went, hundreds went with him, but those who were taken out this way would not necessarily feel that they were being unceremoniously taken. Those servants who were sent to bite the dust and be buried with their masters were considered privileged to be allowed to follow a powerful figure into the afterlife to serve them. However, it was still likely nerve-wracking to know that your fate was tied to the random passing of a person that you worked for. Egyptian royalty stopped this practice early in the First Dynasty, but it may have continued in a more innocent form, with the Egyptians burying mummies with little carved figurines that could magically serve the deceased in the afterlife. Number 7, sunburn. In ancient Egypt, one of the most awful crimes that you could commit was any form of offense or disrespect toward the sun god. If you vandalized or robbed a temple, committed any form of personal disrespect, or were otherwise found guilty of any offense related to the sun god, you were usually sentenced to be set on fire. This punishment was only reserved for the greatest of offenses and was usually accompanied by a ritual that committed the act to the gods. While the ancient Egyptians rarely practiced actual sacrifices, this was one of the few exceptions. While burning is painful enough to begin with, it was considered the most horrific way to go of all the ancient Egyptians because of the ritual significance of the act. They believed strongly in preserving the physical body for life after passing, and believed that destroying the person's physical body completely by burning would leave them with no vessel in the afterlife. And while the gods could still technically intervene to help this person out, it was about as terrifying a punishment as a believer in ancient Egyptian society could imagine. Number 6, sandwich paper. Okay, so this moment isn't actually from ancient Egypt, but it has to do with ancient Egypt, and it is pretty disturbing. There was a time in the early 1900s when anything involving ancient Egypt was considered a fad. Mummies were imported to Europe to be unwrapped at parties, and many mummies were illegally smuggled out of ancient Egypt. The truth is, there were a lot of mummies around, and no one really felt much respect for them. Even at the time, very little proper historical significance was attributed to them. For this reason, getting hold of mummy bandages was not only cheap, but in some cases, cheaper than paper. An enterprising businessman in the United States decided that he could save some money making wrapping paper for food, and imported some old brown mummy paper to do the trick. Unfortunately for him, his plan failed when people started catching cholera, and the use of mummy paper to wrap food was promptly abandoned when it shouldn't have even started in the first place.
Number 5, exile. Exile as a form of punishment was applied in ancient Egypt for certain offenses. It involved banishing an individual from their community or region as a means of punishment and deterrent. Exile was one of the various punitive measures used in the legal systems of ancient Egypt. Exile served as several purposes in ancient Egypt, including punishment, deterrence, and the maintenance of social order. It was viewed as a way to remove individuals who had violated societal norms or committed offenses from the immediate community. The duration of the exile could vary, as some individuals might permanently be banished from their community, while others might face a specific time period of exile which they could actually return. But if you didn't have a calendar on you, it might be a bit tough for you to figure out when you were supposed to come back. Number 4. Retribution. Retribution in ancient Egypt was a concept embedded in the legal and social framework, particularly in cases of serious crimes such as death. Retribution was closely tied to the principles of justice, divine order, as we mentioned earlier, which is ma'at, the belief that the balance and harmony needed to be maintained in the universe. In cases of these killings, the principle of retribution was often applied. Family members of the victim might even have a say in determining the fate of the offender, sometimes seeking revenge or just accepting compensation. This compensation might also involve the offender providing goods, money, or other assets to the victim's family as a means of seeking forgiveness and restoring balance. Retribution was seen as a way of maintaining ma'at, which encompasses the concept of truth, justice, and cosmic balance. Offenses against ma'at, particularly heinous crimes like killings, were believed to be upset the divine order and required corrective measures to restore harmony. Number 3. Corporal punishment. Like in all the ones listed above, there's one thing you need to know, and that there are no lawyers in ancient Egypt. A suspect was interrogated by the police, and the judge in court and witness were brought to testify for against the accused. Since the prevailing belief that a person who had been charged was guilty until proven innocent, witnesses were often beaten to make sure that they were telling the truth. Once one has been charged with a crime, even if one was finally found innocent, one's name was still kept on record as having been a suspect. As such, public disgrace seems to have been a great deterrent as any other punishment. Even one that were completely exonerated of all wrongdoing, one would still be known as the community as a former suspect, so it's still sus. Corporal punishment such as whipping or beating was administered for these certain crimes, and the severity of the physical punishment might correspond to the seriousness of the offense. Number 2. Capital punishment. Law asserted its autonomy as early as the age of the pyramids, whereas the role of religion in legal matters began to diminish. Religion then no longer determined the legal standing of a matter, but it was rather a judicial mechanism which became authoritative, even in the religious sphere. Capital punishment, including execution, was reserved for the most severe crimes such as killing somebody. The methods of execution would include hanging, drowning, or other forms of judicial killings. Against most of these really depend on the severity of these crimes. And finally, of course, number 1, which is the death penalty. I mean, obviously, if you kill someone, you're met in the court of law based on which country you're in, and if you're in Canada, if you commit manslaughter, you might have to face, in the level of seriousness, up to 10 years. In the US, it's up to 25, but of course, in the prison systems vary and depends on what the clause was, as well as on good behavior and then parole. But in ancient Egypt, they appreciated the sanctity of life and respected it, which made them use the death penalty in order to not violate the sanctity, so the divide between killing and manslaughter, as an example, had to be made in order to preserve the non-violation of the death penalty. The death penalty was more for intentional killings and even resulted to psychological sanctions that were viewed more severe than execution. For example, if a parent killed their young, the body of the killer was then tied to the corpse of the victim for 3 days until the moment of decomposition, all while under the protection of guards and burning alive for young killings of their parents. It was also more of a warning to anyone who threatened to kill anyone, and even given the option that if you committed death on yourself and take your own life was apparently a gift granted to those who are sentenced to death.
Kicking off our list at number 10, ancient Egyptian eyeliner. Whenever you see hieroglyphics or any art depicting the great pharaohs, they're usually rocking some impressive eyeliner. They look great, right? Like a 90s pop star, they look awesome. Ancient Egyptians were the OG eyeliner users. They made their own eyeliner from lead salts. And no, before you think about getting creative, do not try this at home. This wasn't an ideal process. See, for starters, these salts were quite high in lead concentration. So, in order to avoid that mess, ancient Egyptians first had to process and then filter that lead salt for up to 30 days in order to get the lead levels low enough to even be applied. So you had to plan accordingly. You're like, oh, I have a pharaoh date in 30 days? Perfect, we'll start now. It was a hazard if done incorrectly. Not only was this ancient beauty practice, well, beautiful to look at, but Egyptians also needed eyeliner to protect against sun damage, as well as fight off any infections. Yeah, we don't encourage rubbing lead on your eyes today. We have a few different methods on, how to look good. I think. None of them include lead, hopefully, ideally. Number 9, hair gel. Back in my day, in high school, I had to use Dippity-Doo Extra Hold hair gel. Yeah, I showed a scale on the side. I always got the 5 out of 6 hold. That was good. 6 was too much. Nobody ever did the full 6. That's crazy talk. But in ancient Egypt, we didn't have styling spiking glue and blasting free spray by DJ Pauly D. No, we have that today, unfortunately, but back then, a little different. Back then, ancient Egyptians loved styling their hair, but again, before DJ Pauly D was born, What is a pharaoh to do? If the Great Pyramids are any indication, they knew something that we didn't. Ancient Egyptians knew how to keep their hair in one place all day long. And that heat too, how do you do it? My curls? I'm jealous. Their hairstyling gel was made with shea butter and coconut oil. But more often than not, they would replace coconut oil with almond oil. So this was a completely natural and strengthening styling gel. Gotcha, today we have whatever that is. Psst, ice spray. That's awesome. DJ Polly, psst. No. Number 8, coffee scrub. I love coffee. I don't think I love coffee enough to do a coffee face scrub, but hey, never say never. I'll try anything once. Ancient Egyptians would use coffee scrub to reduce inflammation, improve blood circulation, and since it's a ground up material, it's gonna remove those dead skin cells at the same time. Next holiday season, grab your aunt some coffee scrub. Just tell her how it reduces puffiness, improves the skin's texture, all that good stuff. It'll give you that youthful pharaoh look that you've been going for, you know what I mean? Merry Christmas, here you go, coffee on your face. Using grounded coffee powder to exfoliate your skin sounds like a new idea. It's certainly a hot trend today. But before TikTok, ancient Egyptians already knew these benefits. Damn, I'm gonna get a coffee scrub. Maybe I'll do it. I don't know. After I'm done this cup, I'll just rub it on my face at my desk and see what everyone says. Number 7, Dead Sea Salt. You'll never feel more alive than when you use Dead Sea Salt. Here we go. Ancient Egyptians were ahead of the exfoliation game. Dare I say, they invented it. Not only were coffee scrubs a necessity, but salt from the Dead Sea was one of the most popular ancient Egyptian skincare products ever. We traveled far and wide for this one. Salt collected from the Dead Sea was used to exfoliate dead skin cells, and it was so well known at this point that rumor has it Cleopatra herself would travel all the way to the Dead Sea from Egypt just to take a bath. Yeah, let's be honest, after this point, we'd all love a rejuvenating Dead Sea float. That sounds way better than what I've got at home. Well, bathtub, I can't even fit in this thing. Dead Sea sounds way better. I once left a house party early to go have a bath. Swear to God. York University. Dipped at like 10 o'clock. I was like, I'm cold. I'm not doing this. 40-minute walk. Worth it. Leave your friends for a bath. Do it. Number 6, wax cones. Head cones, also known as perfume cones, were used in ancient Egypt. You've probably seen them in a thumbnail here at some point. The art depicting head cones is quite unique looking. It's like a pharaoh with a triangle on their head. You're like, what's happening there? What is this? Is this like Illuminati? What is this? Long before Pantene Pro V, when it came to head cleanliness, these triangular wax cones were here to save the day. And they looked pretty fun to use. I don't know. They would just sit on top of your head. You didn't need to mix anything with lead for 30 days or bran or anything like that. You didn't need to put any organs in jars. Just a wax cone atop of your head. Easy. Back in 2019, experts found archaeological evidence that they were in fact used. So yeah, not just a glyph. Real life history. So I have to bring this up. Men and women alike would wear this cone, and your body heat would slowly melt the wax cone down and through your hair. The cone itself was made of oils, fat, resin. It would be placed on their wig or directly onto your head, and it would keep melting and refreshing all day long. It's like a little candle almost. A nice little human candle. Nice little Egyptian man candle. As fascinating as ancient Egyptian culture is, I don't think anybody misses wax cones. It's a little easier nowadays. I'm too tall too. I can't have a wax cone. Are you kidding me? It would hit this mic. No way.
Number 5, the plow. Back in the day when we started to move away from the hunter-gatherer lifestyle to more of a work the land and make a new farm lifestyle, Omari would go out into the field with his hoe and cultivate his land by hand. As you can imagine, this takes a hell of a long time, but we're a problem-solving species. That's why we got to where we are now. Enter the plow and the evolution of agriculture. So basically, you take your 2 favorite oxen and you connect them together, and you connect them to a beam of wood that shoots out behind to the plow handle and to the blade of the plow that would go into the ground and be dragged behind by the ox, breaking up the ground. All the farmer has to do is sow the seed. This simple invention changed everything, and it's still used in places where machinery is just unaffordable.
Number 4, the calendar. No one would blame you if in the last 2 years you forgot what day it was. I know after spending a lot of time inside, I forgot what day it was, but every day is a Saturday when you eat spicy chicken wings in your tighty whities. Well, the Egyptians may have had one of the first calendars, and a gosh darn good one too. Their calendar had 12 months and over 300 days. The trouble is, after a while it kinda got a little inaccurate. They did their best to fix it. I mean, clearly if you look at the calendar, clearly it's the 5th of, well, I think that looks like 3 men walking in sand. And next month we have a special festival happening. It looks like it'll be a sunny day on the 12th of man with ball on his hat. Hieroglyphs are hard, man. I don't know.
Number 3, clocks. Alright, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you the Egyptians invented the modern clock. No. But they did have to tell time, and as any dad or survival guru will tell you, the most reliable way to tell what time of the day it is would be that massive floating ball of plasma in the sky, the sun. Assuming it isn't a super cloudy day or anything. The obelisks we see in Egypt were not just fancy deco pieces. They were actually sun clocks, used to see how the sun would cast shadows throughout different times of the day. They even used it to figure out which days were longer and shorter. There was an even more interesting clock though, a water clock. It was basically a stone vessel with a tiny little hole at the bottom which allowed water to drip at a constant rate. The water marks spaced out at different levels would tell you how many hours had passed. This one's good because it worked at night and on cloudy days as well.
Number 2, mummification.
Welcome back to the land of the living, my friend. You've been gone for quite some time. Oh.
Yes, the process of mummification, probably the number one thing ancient Egypt is known for, maybe besides the pyramids. While not the only civilization of the past to practice this, they kinda ran the show here. Basically, the pharaoh's corpse has to stay fresh so their soul can make it into the afterlife. The heart stays, but everything else is like a furniture after a bad divorce. It must go. The brain was stirred up like a family reunion square dance and drained like last night's punch bowl. But wait, horror fans, there's more. Lungs, liver, bladder, intestines, stomach, kidney, and basically anything you can scoop out with your favorite ice cream scoop is going. But don't toss them out though. Some of these organs were preserved in jars. Makes nice decorations beside the piles of gold found in the tombs.
Yes, my liver jars. Oh, yes.
Number 1, cosmetic makeup. The ancient Egyptians created makeup as far back as 4000 BC. That's a long time ago. And that's how long we've been obsessed with our looks. Yikes. Their makeup actually served more of a purpose than just looking good though. The eye makeup they used specifically was believed to cure eye diseases, which wasn't true, and would protect them from the evil eye, which, I don't know, could have been true. Kind of like the ink, they would use soot, but they would combine it with a lead mineral called galena to create a black substance they called kohl. That's K-H-O-L, not C-O-A-L. They had multiple colors actually. They would make green makeup by combining malachite with galena. Now, if you saw our bizarre beauty products and history video, you probably know that lead, even lead minerals like galena, aren't really great for you. But hey, anything in the name of looking good.
We're gonna start with the latest and the greatest. Number 10 is the latest Sakara discoveries. So on January 26th of 2023, after a year-long excavation of the notorious Sakara necropolis, 2 ancient tombs that date back to the 5th and 6th dynasty of the Old Kingdom are unveiled to the public. Zahi Hawass, who isn't my favorite person to cite, gave a statement on one of the mummies found. Kanohededefe was an inspector of officials, supervisor of nobles, and a priest in the pyramid complex of Unas. Mehdi had many titles, one of them being the Keeper of Secrets, which is a title you'll hear again later in this video. This would also be a great time to take a second and subscribe to The Hive if you're a fan of discoveries such as these. Also found was a stone sarcophagus with a mummified man named Fatek, but the most important of the dusty corpses found was a gold leaf covered mummy. Hekashepes was found down a 15-meter burial shaft inside a large rectangular limestone sarcophagus. While other mummies have been found with this unusual coating choice, Hekashepes gets to take seniority. This mummy is the oldest complete mummy covered in gold, Hawass said in an interview, having led the excavation himself. The excavation team also found dozens of other valuable artifacts, including statues, some of which still have their original paint intact, as well as amulets, coins, earrings, rings, and tablets, all of which are currently being displayed at the Step Pyramid of Hauser in Sakara. Number 9 is the tomb special of collecting crocs. Archaeologists excavating the Theban necropolis in Egypt made an extraordinary but unusual discovery which was announced on December 20th of 2022. 9 crocodile heads placed inside 2 tombs belonging to high-ranking nobles. Archaeologist Patrick Chudzik told the Newsweek that the discovery was the first of its kind, as crocodile remains have never been discovered inside the tombs of Egypt, despite usually being found inside of temples or special catacombs. Dr. Chudzik explains, in our case, things are different. Firstly, only the heads and not the entire bodies of these Nile reptiles have been deposited in these tombs where we work. Secondly, they were not mummified, only wrapped in linen. There's a significant difference in this, as no preservatives were used. Finally, the remains were found in the tombs of humans, not catacombs of sacred animals. The tombs belonged to 2 top officials during the reign of the pharaoh Nehefetre Mentuhotep II. One being the Chancellor Cheti, a high official, but the occupant of the second tomb is actually still anonymous to us. Placing of the crocodile heads in the tombs, according to Dr. Chudzik, project certainly was unusual, but not entirely unprecedented. He believes that earlier researchers paid scant attention to such finds that depict cultural practices but weren't treasures, stating that it's likely similar offerings had been placed in quite a few other tombs of rich individuals, but those offerings were discarded by the earlier researchers who discovered them. Number 8 is about the Ramessid Cemetery. So in April of 2023, the joint Dutch-Italian archaeological mission of the Sakara archaeological site discovered the tomb of a person called Banhitia from the Ramessid period, the chief servant of the tomb of Aten. Alongside his tomb was the discovery of 4 small chapels, reinforcing the previous theories that suggest the reuse of the space between the tombs of the 18th dynasty in later eras and the constructions of tombs and chapels in that area during the Ramessid period of Egypt. The cemetery is a self-contained temple, having its own entrance and inner courtyard, as well as an underground burial chamber. Oddly, 2 out of those 4 chapels I mentioned were in dedication of a person that they don't recognize called Yo-Yo. Endless inscriptions and scenes on the walls are distinguished by their accuracy and quality of detail. One in particular shows a scene of funerary procession of Yo-Yo and the process of reviving his mummy again in the hereafter to live in the afterlife as a god, in addition to a scene depicting the cow goddess Hathor and a boat of the god Sakara, the god of the underworld. Inside the tomb, the mission found a stela picturing of Banhasi and his wife Baya, the singer of Amun, before a table of sacrifice and several drawings of priests and animals. While some have warriors, others have the terracotta inscriptions, which is number 7. The Egyptian Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities announced another discovery in Sakara, March 17th, 2022. As the title of the video reveals, it's very obviously tombs, specifically 5 of them. All burials date to either Old Kingdom or the first transition/intermediate period, roughly 4,700 to 4,000 years ago. All belong to top officials and dignitaries from respective time periods and are in good state of preservation. Iri, one of the top nobles of the court, had a well-defined pathway leading to his burial room, with the walls adorned with engraved pictures of many funeral scenes painted in bright terracotta and sandstones. Artistically, the colors of the paintings are considered royal colors by officials. Grave number 2 belonged to the wife of a man named Yart. Meanwhile, grave number 3 belonged to a person named Babi Farahafe, who used to occupy several important court positions, namely supervisor of the Great House, the chanting priest, and the cleaner of the house. The 5th cemetery is a man called Hanu, who had many titles such as the mayor, and the 6th grave, however, is the most interesting of them as it has the archaeologist a little giddy. A woman called Betty, who is responsible for the king's makeup, appearance, and dressing, and was buried with tons of her cosmetic tools. Allegedly, she is also a priestess of Hathor, who's the goddess of love, beauty, music, fertility, and pleasure. You want to hear something crazy? Number 6 is how they cracked open a tomb and found 100 sealed coffins. It was announced on the 14th of November 2020. It's the largest find of that year. It's 100 sealed coffins and over 40 statues alongside hundreds of mixed artifacts. Naturally, they're discovered at the Sakara necropolis, and carbon dating tells us that the items date back to the Ptolemaic dynasty that ruled Egypt for some 300 years, from about 320 BC to 30 BC and the late period. The coffins were found inside a burial shaft that had not been opened at all for 2,500 years. The preliminary studies revealed quickly that most of these coffins belonged to 26th dynasty priests, top officials, and elites. A number of wooden statues and colored gilded masks were also found, all in really great condition, and 28 of the statuettes are Pates Sokar, the main god of the Sakara necropolis. But there's one very special and unusual statue in this tomb, a bronze statue of the god Nefertiti. The statue is inlaid with valuable precious stones. We're talking red agate, turquoise, jade, and lapis lazuli. It is 35 centimeters tall and has the name of its owner, Badia Muniz, engraved in its base like Andy in Toy Story.
Number 5, Horus and Set. Speaking of Horus, earlier, remember how I said Horus had to take over defending his father? Well, here is where this story begins. When Horus grew up to be a man, he pulled a Hamlet. He was like, "You killed my father, prepare to die." Thus a series of battles ensued, and one of the gods didn't play fair. Set kept cheating at everything and continued to come out as victor. Not surprising, since he didn't earn his way on the throne, he killed for it, kind of like a certain Claudius. Eventually, Isis stepped out to help her son/nephew overcome her brother. She set a trap for Set, but after some pitiless begging for his own life, she let him go. Horus was pissed, so angry some of the other gods got upset that he was so angry. They agreed to compete in a final boat race, and Horus was like crushing it. He was doing really well, he was about to win, but then of course Set cheated by turning into a hippopotamus and attacked the boat, therefore claiming victory once again. Osiris finally showed up and declared that no man should take the throne through murder. So Horus took the throne. Why Osiris didn't just settle the whole deal from the beginning is confusing in itself, but hey, kinda reminded me of the eagles that showed at the end of Lord of the Rings that could have saved like 3 movies, you know? Kinda like that. Anyways, let's move on. Number 4, Ra and his boat. Ra is one of the most revered gods in Egyptian mythology, especially since he was the god of the sun. He was depicted as a man with the head of a falcon. That kind of makes sense. He was once the greatest of all gods, but had to take a step back after he got too old and tired, and especially considering his task, I can see why. His job was to drive away darkness and sail across the skies, delivering light wherever he went. But at night, he would dive into the underworld and have to cross 12 gates. 12 hours, an hour per gate. After paying his respect to Osiris every night, a giant snake named Apophis tried to attack and swallow the boat. Every night! Poor guy, no wonder he got worn out. Every day it got harder to defend, and even one night, Apophis succeeded, but could only hold the sunlight for so long. She threw it up, which explained solar eclipses. After Set was cast out after the whole nephew battle, he ended up serving Ra in his boat and kept the snake at bay, but there's something confusing coming later that I think you'll agree is very confusing, so here we go. Coming up, next we have Bast, number 3. Have you ever had a cat look you up and down and kind of like expect something? Like worship, you know? Are you a cat person? Dog person? Let me know in the comments. Well, that's because cats were a big deal in Egyptian mythology. They even had their own goddess. Bastet was a cat goddess depicted as a woman with a cat's head. Cats had a meaningful role in ancient Egypt as they protected their food from rats and snakes. They were even seen as family members, and to harm one was punishable by death. Legend says that sometimes cats would enter burning buildings to save their families. If they died, the goddess would bring them back to life, hence the idea of cats having 9 lives. There it is. Now here's where things get confusing. You know that story I told about Ra? Well, apparently Bastet was in the boat with him as well. During the day she would ride with him, and at night she would turn into a cat and then defend the boat from Apophis the snake. But I thought that was Set. So many conflicting things. I saw like a couple different stories who said each thing was different, so who knows. Number 2, Jeb and Nut. Yet another sibling partnership, we have Jeb and Nut. They fell deeply in love and could never be separated. They were that couple who would like constantly be like, oh my god, stop, right next to each other at dinner, you know what I mean? Jeb was the god of the earth and Nut was the god of the sky. A previously mentioned god, Atum, found their union inappropriate, so he pushed Nut into the sky far away from Jeb. He just didn't like being a third wheel. Jeb and Nut were close enough to see each other, but could never hold each other again. And she gave birth to Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. Some say Horus too, but I don't think that's true. Number 1, the treasure thief. Okay, I don't know how I feel about this story, okay? This doesn't really feel like harmony is in balance, but anyways. The treasure thief ends in a way I really didn't expect, and I'm not sure you will either. Long ago, a great pharaoh with a wealth of riches decided to build a pyramid in which to keep them safe. One of the builders was wise to his plan and decided to find a way to claim them for himself. He built a stone vault with a hidden entrance covered by a slab so he could get to the riches, but unfortunately he fell ill before he could return, so he told his sons of his plan. The sons headed to the pyramid in the dead of night, following their father's order, but unbeknownst to them, the pharaoh had laid booby traps and one brother was caught in one. Not wanting to be found or interrogated, revealing his other brother, he told his brother to chop his head off. Ugh, that he did. Loyalty? I don't know. The pharaoh, upon finding the body, hung it up in the town square in the hopes of like weeding out whoever it belonged to. But the other brother, being so clever, got the guards drunk and stole back his brother's body in the dead of night. The pharaoh was like, I'm not even mad, I'm just impressed. He gave the thief a pardon, summoned him to the square, and gave his daughter to marry him. Yeah dude, you tried to steal my jewels? Don't worry about it. Have my daughter, because you're so talented at your job. Great work.
Kicking off the list at number 10, KV 55. Located in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, Tomb 55, otherwise known as KV 55, was found by Edward Arden back in 1907. It was discovered right next to King Tut's tomb, and the reason we call this tomb by a number rather than name is because we really don't know who was inside it yet. Even the walls outside of the tomb, they aren't covered with any hieroglyphs to tip us off or give us any hints. It's just bare, which is kind of eerie. As you walk down the 20 steps towards KV 55, you'll notice markings on the entrance, markings that show that the entrance was widened since it was first cut, along with its ceilings being raised higher. So whatever was in there needed the room. The only hint as to who was buried remains on the walls. One hieroglyph remains, and it was discovered in 1907, and it translates to, "The evil one that shall not live again." Even these massive stones were built in order to prevent anything from getting out. See, usually with these ancient tombs, it's the opposite. The description for who's inside the tomb had also been destroyed. So we have no idea who or what is in KV 55. Number 9, King Teti. The Pyramid of Teti was built for the first ruler of the 6th dynasty, and while it's not flashy or massive as these other pyramids, the insides contain the oldest writing in the religious world. Pretty insane. Now these texts go back to 2400 BC, way back when we used, BBM. The pyramid texts were specifically written so that this King Teti could ascend to the heavens after his death. There are spells and incantations meant to free the king's soul and arrive in the cosmos. More specifically, for Teti to become a star in the sky and then join Osiris and Orion in the God Squad. There's even instructions on how to preserve the body and travel to said heavens. World's oldest instruction manual for the win. Number 8, Queen Nefertiti. After a scan was done on King Tut's tomb, there were cracks found on the north and earth walls. East, Taylor, east, not earth. There were cracks found on the north and east side walls, so we believe that this is a secret passageway to Queen Nefertiti, the ruler during the 14th century BC, and also wife to King Tut. Queen Nefertiti's parents are also still unknown to this day, so that adds to it. And with ancient texts depicting that these kings and queens would leave Earth and then later return, perhaps they are both descendants of extraterrestrials. And this flying sun disk that they worshipped was not the sun, but rather a winged alien ancestor. Number 7, Dozer. For this one, we're looking into some bull worshipping, so grab your red scarves and start waving them around. Just north of the step pyramid of the pharaoh Dozer, archaeologist August Marionette discovered this site in 1851. The Serapeum is a temple dedicated to the Egyptian deity Serapis, a combination of Osiris and Apis in human form. Now this was a large burial ground for the Apis bulls. They were basically these bulls that were said to be sacred, and after their death, they would become immortal. Remember that, that's important. Today at Sakara, there's this massive vault. It's 382 yards long, and it's carved out of sandstone bedrock. It's massive, and along the sides of them are 24 chambers, each with sarcophagus carved out of a single chunk of granite. Now inside these boxes were animal remains, just bones and all. But back then in those times, you weren't allowed to break up any bodies. That was a no-go. You had to mummify them. So how are these tombs built, first of all, so perfectly, weighing over 80 tons, and where do these bones come from? Perhaps these are the remains of the Apis bull. After all, that's the inspiration for the Minotaurs, so maybe alien ancestors looked a lot more jacked than we may think. Number 6, dung beetles. This one isn't exactly a pharaoh at all, but it's too good to leave out, especially if we're talking about aliens here. It's important. Dung beetles, also known as scarabs, are the only species in the entire world that follows the Milky Way. Think about that for a second. Let's talk about it. Some animals follow the sun. Turtles sprint to the ocean the second they're born to avoid getting plucked up by birds. Now these insects would follow the line of the Milky Way and then roll their towards it. Literally, their poop, they would roll it towards the skies, which is insane. Symbols of these beetles are seen all over, either in hieroglyphics or even in movies. Their presence is known. Near the sacred lake at the Temple of Karnak, there's a massive scarab monument. And there's even a legend still to this day behind said statue that if you walk around it 9 times, you would find health, wealth, and love. And you'd also probably be a little bit dizzy. The scarab is there to represent the god Khepri, which at the time Egyptians believed was the sun as well. Also known as the scarab-faced god, which terrifying when you imagine that. Are these bugs just trying to get home into space to their bug alien master? Why does he need so much poop? Whatever DIY project they're working on in the Milky Way probably doesn't smell too good. Number 5, Luxor Tomb. We've been saying 2,500 years ago, and don't get me wrong, that's an awful long time to go. But in 2014, archaeologists discovered a 4,000-year-old tomb from the 11th dynasty, tucked away in Luxor, Egypt, of course, as this list says. Spanish archaeologists found a tomb belonging to a leader from the 11th dynasty, and it's pretty obvious that this was somebody from the royal family or somebody who was a high-ranking official, because at the time, Luxor was the capital city of ancient Egypt, and officials also believed this tomb could have been used as a mass grave. The important thing to note here is that the tomb had also been used during the 17th dynasty because tools and utensils from that later time were also found in this grave. We're gonna find a spork in 5,000 years and be like, ah yes, ancient tools, interesting. Number 4, 210 sarcophagi. So we thought it was a pretty big deal when 160 bodies were recently discovered in Egypt. This was back in September 2020. Over 160 coffins were found. Wild, right? Well, those are rookie numbers, turns out. For this one, archaeologists found 210 sarcophagi near Queen Nefertiti's funerary temple in the city of the dead, Sakara. Yeah, there were over 160, surprise. Maybe next time you check in with us, that number will be even higher. Who knows? Hopefully, / maybe hopefully not. I don't know how I feel about this. This was January 2021. We probably would have seen it on the news, but that was when 768 people were storming the Capitol, so the news was a bit busy, I guess. Thanks. These sealed coffins were untouched for thousands of years. They went from finding 160 to finding 210. That's incredible. According to the ministry, the sarcophagi were completely closed and haven't been opened since they were buried at all. They opened a few though, of course, just to analyze and display them, but that's it. Yeah, leave the rest. I'm not focused on ancient curses or Brendan Fraser having to come out and save the day. Just let dead people lay where they are. Let them rest. The amount of effort gone into hiding and preserving their memory alone, I mean, look how long it's taken for us to even find these things. It's almost like they didn't want to be found. Number 3, the ancient curse. The walls of some of these tombs have warnings from the gods, which is a lot. One of them warning trespassers that the gods will wring their neck like that of a goose. Also, if I walked into somebody's property now and it said trespassers' necks will be wrung out like a goose, I would turn back. I wouldn't want to investigate further. I would just walk away. You don't need to be an ancient god to get that message across, you know what I mean? But inside the found tomb of the Vizier Ankhemour, a pharaoh's official from 4,000 years ago, a curse was written. Buried in a mastaba, an above-ground massive tomb, was this warning. Might do against this, my tomb, the same shall be done to your property. It also warns of the Vizier's knowledge of secret spells and magic, and threatens to fill impure intruders with a fear of seeing a ghost. Yeah, there's that, or beware of dog. I don't know, you can pick which is more impactful on your property, sure. Number 2, the animal tombs. This tomb was found, as you may have guessed, in the Valley of the Kings. You're getting good, nice. But this one doesn't sound like the rest. I mean, for starters, it's a number rather than a name. What in the Elon Musk is happening here? Whose name was a number, huh? KV52 was discovered in 1906 by Edward Ayrton. Tomb KV50, KV51, and this one, KV52, they all form a group referred to as the animal tombs. Underneath 6 feet of debris, the entrance to these vaults were found, so when we enter this tomb, specifically KV52, that's been untouched, ideally for thousands of years, we can look forward to finding anything. In fact, whatever we do find, it's a win. It helps complete this age-long puzzle. So when officials opened KV52 and it was completely empty, well, that doesn't feel too nice. Something here is wrong. It was empty except for 2 boxes. Both were black and undecorated, which is odd considering what we've learned on this list. The larger of the 2 contained the remains of a monkey, and the smaller one was a canopic chest that had 4 compartments in it. Hauntingly bare compared to what else we've seen on this list, but it gets a little better. We're not done yet. Finally, number 1, Queen Nefertiti's hidden chamber. When researchers are 90% sure about something, that's a pretty good sign. You only say you're 90% sure of something when you know for sure. You leave 10% in case anything else goes wrong out of your control, right? 90%, that's confident, we got this. So when Egyptian authorities said they're 90% sure there's a hidden chamber in King Tut's tomb, well, we got a little jazzed. Got some jazz hands going on. Not gold, jazz hands. Back in 2015, a paper was published on the burial of Queen Nefertiti. Archaeologist Nicholas Reeves argued that while conducting scans on the ancient site, Reeves found what resembled traces of doors beneath the plaster. Now, it's been considered previously by archaeologists that King Tut's mask, having ear piercings and all, suggests that at that time, that tomb and that death mask was actually meant for Queen Nefertiti, not King Tut. But because King Tut died suddenly when he was 19, plans had to quickly change. 90% sure is good enough for me. What do you guys think? Comment down below all your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us on BumbleBee. I've been your host, Taylor McWaters. Those were the top 10 hidden doors found in Egyptian tombs that should never be opened. And we opened a few of them. There's probably going to be a part 2. We're curious. Comment down below, hit subscribe, hit the thumbs, you know what to do. See you next time. Bye. Officials also believe this tomb could have been used as a mass grave due to the, large amounts of human remains found inside. It wasn't just one skeleton, it was a bunch. It wasn't one little, it was 1,000.
Number 10, mummies. This should come as no surprise to anyone, but yeah, mummies. While not the first and not the last civilization to mummify their friends and family, ceasing to exist, they are probably most known for it. Well, that and maybe the pyramids. The pyramids are pretty cool, I guess. The process of mummifying or preserving the body was thought to be important for the soul during the afterlife. If the vessel or your body was not intact, then your soul could get lost. Therefore, if you want the pharaoh to live forever in the afterlife, then you must pickle and preserve the mighty king. I don't want my soul getting lost. Number 9. 40-year-old's worst nightmare. Despite my best efforts and anti-aging cream, there will come a time when I will be old. Personally, I'm not worried about putting some mileage on. That's life. However, something I am concerned about is the effects of aging. Have you ever just noticed that you ain't as limber as you used to be? You get tired easily. And if you have more than 3 beers, you have to lay down for 3 days. However, something that happens to a lot of men reaching their 40s is a little trouble in the bedroom. This was an issue in ancient Egypt, except sadly, there wasn't a messed up process to fix impotence. I know, right? That's crazy. You thought I was gonna say something weird like wrap a snake around it or something. But no. When in modern times, the cute waitress at the golf clubhouse just doesn't get your blood pumping anymore, you could reach for a small blue pill that everybody knows. Egyptians did not possess such luxuries and instead prayed for the Pishadil to work. Dear Desert Jeebus, please make my wiener work again. Thank you. Number 8. Ahead of their time. Ancient Egyptians just may have been ahead of their time and didn't know it. The Egyptians had tons of different herbs, plants, and methods for treating all kinds of ailments. Their alchemy skill was maxed out. I never did that. However, one method they came up with may have been helping more than they thought. A porridge mixture that was boiled down that contained tetracycline, which, just in case you didn't know, is known as an antibiotic. This would have been very helpful for the time, as a scrape on the knee could be the difference between living and, well, not living. While this was being used, it's unsure if the Egyptians really knew why this method worked. We doubt they understood the finite details of antibiotics, and I'm not gonna stand here and pretend that I do either, cause I don't. Number 7.
Tales from the Crypt Keeper.
You didn't think I was gonna talk about mummies and not talk about how they make them, right? Hold on to your spittoons, this is gonna be a rough one. Okay, so we all know that when we pass on, our bodies begin to decay and break down. The Egyptians knew this, so they would have to be one step ahead if they were to have the king pickled in time for the afterlife. Well, first things first, the brains? They gotta go. They would remove the brain with a large spike and sort of mash it up there and well, then they drain the contents from the nose, which that is just disgusting. Stomach, colon, and lungs, well, those won't be needed in the afterlife either, so they gotta go too. But the heart stays though. That's where the soul is. The king was then dried out with mounds of alkaline salt in the world's best beef jerky impression. Afterwards, oils were rubbed into the skin and eventually a resin was applied to aid in the linen wrap sticking to the body, making for that distinct Tupperware brand airtight seal. The Pickled King was wrapped numerous more times just to be safe, and then, if he was OG enough, placed into a sarcophagus, and if you're really cool, you'll get your own room full of gold and treasures, and your pet Whiskers, which is a cat, and be mummified because, well, you need him in the afterlife too. That is one heck of an undertaking process. And to be fair, it kinda worked, because there have been a few mummies recovered from Egypt, and they're in amazing condition, considering the age, of course. Number 6, a little off the top. Okay, without the comment section oversharing here, some people have had circumcisions and some haven't. It's a part of life, okay? That's how it goes. Debatable to some, but it happens. This was a common practice in ancient Egypt, claimed to be for hygiene reasons. However, there's something a little bit different about their process. See, today it happens when you're a baby. A strange man comes in the room, and he cuts what he has to cut. L'chaim, it's done. There it is. That's it. It's over. Egyptians waited a little longer, however, closer to the age of 12 or 13. Can you imagine just chilling in the field one day, and then some strange dude grabs you and slaps you down on the table and makes a withdrawal from you to meat and veg? I talked to the chief today, and he just said that's not it. Don't do that.
Number 5. We love cats. I'm allergic to cats, but I still go for it. I still pet them. I risk everything just to... Yes, I don't care. I ruined my entire weekend just to get my face all up in their whiskers. Nobody did it like ancient Egyptians. You've probably heard this at one point or another. They worshipped cats. They were like, you know, the legendary cats. That was their thing. I'm more of a golden retriever guy, but I get it, they're cute. They respected them, they worshipped them. Even though at the time, dogs were respected for being hunters, cats were still considered magical creatures. It's because they just stare at shit randomly. Mid-conversation, a cat will just be like, No, they're not magical, they're terrifying. They're on something. If you had a cat, you had good luck. Apparently, a friend of mine has 2 fat cats. He has some pretty good luck, I think. If they're fat, they're good? When a cat passed away back in ancient Egyptian times, they too were mummified. You would think that alone was just plenty of respect, but ancient Egyptians and pharaohs, they would obviously go a step further. Hence this fun list. After their cat died, they would shave their eyebrows off and would mourn them until they grew back. That's like 3.5 months of cat depression. That's wild. I got over my childhood animal in like 6 business days. It's not a bad thing, it's just that's a long time, you know? Next time your friend tells you their cat passed away, tell them if they really love them, they would shave their eyebrows. Test them. Number 4, ancient Photoshop. When we look back at ancient artwork, we see these kings and queens, well, all the pharaohs were considered kings, but it was equal at the time. And they all look athletic. They all look like these warriors, right? They look to be in great shape. When in reality, a lot of these pharaohs were probably pretty overweight or unhealthy. I mean, think about it. If you slam wine and bread all day plus a little dab of honey every 8 minutes, you're gonna gain some weight. Yeah, that's how it goes. Many of these ancient pharaohs did have diabetes, and Queen Hatshepsut, who was alive during the 15th century BC, her sarcophagus shows her as slim and strong and all that jazz, but almost all historians agree that she was out of shape and quite unhealthy. Honestly, fair, I would do the exact same thing. She was ahead of her time. If somebody was like, hey, I'm gonna make a statue for you, what should I make it look like? I'm like, yeah, give him an 8-pack, make him jacked, I don't know. Make him look like Michael Jordan, I don't know. Number 3, gender reveal parties. Okay, we've seen all these videos online. A guy goes to swing and hit a baseball, he misses, it hits the ground. There's a big pink cloud of smoke, everyone's like, oh my god. Gender reveal parties, right? They're pretty popular. Turns out they're popular back in ancient Egyptian days, but nobody did it like them. Also, nobody started any wildfires back then when any ancient Egyptians did it, so that's nice. We should go take a note from them. Back in the day, Egyptians had a pretty interesting method for predicting the gender of a newborn. You would have to use wheat and barley seeds. You would have to pee on them, and then however it grew, that would determine the sex. I would feel bad. First of all, I'd be like, hi, we're curious, don't mind us. Just gonna pee on your crops, sir. Let us know how it grows. We're aiming towards a boy this time. We have 96 girls, so we're gonna try a couple of boys. Yeah, depending on how the crops grew, they could accurately predict the sex of the child, and it worked a lot of the time. It's pretty wild. We went from watering crops to burning them down just to find out a gender. Hashtag it's a boy. Number 2, more tattoos. More tattoos for number 2. We love it. You guys saw what I did. Ancient Egyptians worshipped animals. We talked about that, the whole cat stuff and the whole hippo situation in part 1, that was violent. But what about baboons? Did they get any love? Baboons, I say it weird, baboons. They were pretty important pieces to this ancient Egyptian puzzle. Some mummies were found with tattoos of baboons on their bodies. One of the most strange things pharaohs did back in ancient Egyptian days was train baboons to make arrests. Yep, stop resisting, you're going to jail. Me and 7 baboons, let's carry them into the car, bam. Imagine stealing food for your family just to try and get by, and then 4 baboons pop out, start doing parkour, and then arrest you in front of everyone. That'd be so embarrassing and also alarming. They trained baboons to pick fruit, make beer, and even entertain. Yeah, these baboons were the life of the party, apparently. If their dance moves alone would be reason enough to get a tattoo on one of my arms, honestly. Going all crazy, throwing their own at people, I'd be like, yeah, right here, or here, I don't care. And finally, number 1, the afterlife. One of the most fascinating parts about these ancient Egyptian pharaohs is that they would pass away literally covered in gold, head to toe. It's nice to know that this long ago, some of these kings and queens still rest untouched by grave robbers or explorers. The afterlife for these pharaohs was important. And as soon as they take on the throne, work is immediately underway on their tomb. That's a little grim when you think about it. It's like, hey, congratulations, we're gonna start making where you're gonna be buried. It's like, thanks, I think. These monuments took time, but they were built to last, and clearly they have. Pharaoh's eyes were painted black with coal. They did this so that they would look like the god Horus after they passed on.